Ladies and gentlemen, this is Jamel from Fantasy Life, and today I bring you episode 30 of the Naruto Breakdown. Today we're actually going to be going over the strategist, Shikamaru Nara. Now for those who don't know who Shikamaru is, he's pretty much one of the most intelligent characters in the Hidden Leaf Village, with a IQ of over 200, which is amazing. He's smarter than actually most of the Jonin. His ability is mostly around shadow possession and shadow attack jutsus. So he's a pretty interesting character, and the way he's able to implement all of this stuff is pretty cool. So let's get into this breakdown. And for those who are new to the breakdown series, this is basically when I take a particular Naruto character and I kind of break down their attack power, speed, chakra consumption, jutsu, so on and so forth. So let's get into Shikamaru. Okay, so in terms of Shikamaru's speed, he's pretty much average speed, not faster or slower than most characters. He's about on par with most of the other characters in this particular game. Let's get into his attacks, and he hits fairly hard. I didn't realize how hard he hit. It's about 15% damage with his regular attack, which is about average. His up combo does about 15%, but when you chain it together with the air combo, you're looking at about 20 to 25% damage, which is not bad. And his down combo, you're looking at about 20% damage on his down combo. So that, and I understand that's average with most characters in the game, but I just assume for whatever reason Shikamaru hit a little softer than a lot of the other characters, because he's not really known for his taijutsu abilities. He's known for basically using his shadow clone. Now this is his tilt. His tilt is actually pretty cool, and I do recommend it, especially after you like teleport from an opponent's attack, only because it has an okay range, and Shikamaru is pretty much close to somewhat mid-range character. It has a decent amount of range on it, as you can see, and it's really good if somebody's attacking you, that you can kind of teleport out of their attack and then hit them with that before they get to you. Another thing I would recommend would be the jutsu, but the jutsu obviously uses chakra, which that doesn't use any chakra, and it does a good job of kind of knocking them back onto the floor, giving you an opportunity to run up on them. So I do highly recommend the tilt. It's actually a pretty good tilt. Does only about 5% damage, unfortunately, but it does have a decent amount of range in it too, so that's another good thing. Next up is his jutsu. His jutsu is the shadow stitching jutsu. Cool thing is it only takes 25% chakra, so you can actually do the jutsu 4 times before having to reload your chakra. So that's actually pretty good. Not too many characters can do their jutsus 4 times. Unfortunately, it doesn't have unlimited range. As you can see, it doesn't have much range on it. But if you do hit them with it, you're looking at a decent amount of damage, about 10% damage. Cool thing too is if they block it, it does do a lot of damage to their block, as it hits multiple times, as you can see. So that's another good thing about the jutsu. Unfortunately, you cannot do it in the air or anything to that nature. His grab is a pretty good grab, but it's a close range grab, which I would have liked his grab to be a little bit longer range. But the cool thing is it throws them up against the wall, which always knocks off chakra pretty much. So that's the cool thing about his grab. Now let's get into his ultra. Ultra takes 30% chakra if you miss, 40% if you connect. As you can see, he's a fairly close range character, so you got to be fairly close range for his ultra as well. For those who remember this is actually the move he actually does to Hidan to defeat Hidan in the anime, and it was really cool how he went about implementing it. As you can see, it does about 30 to 35% damage on Hidan if you're able to connect it. So that's cool. Let's get into Shikamaru's awakening. Now in his awakening, he does get a slight damage buff. His speed remains the same, still average speed, but he does get a slight damage buff. So his regular attack now does about 20% damage. His upper attack does about 20% damage on the initial hit, but when you chain it to the air combo, you're looking at a pretty good 30 to 35% damage. It's going to do about the same amount of damage as his ultimate jutsu. although that's actually a lot easier to connect than his ultimate jutsu. His bottom attack is going to do about 25 to 30% damage, which is still pretty respectable. Grab is still the same grab, just has a slight little more damage to it. His jutsu is actually the same jutsu too. Well, sorry, his tilt is the same exact tilt, although it does have a slight range increase. Nothing too noticeable, but it is slightly longer range. So it doesn't do much damage. As you can see, it only does about 5 to 10% damage. His jutsu is the same. It only takes 25% chakra if you were to do it. So you can do it 4 times before needing to charge up your chakra. The jutsu also gets a slight damage increase, and it just has a different look to it. It does do less hit damage. As you can see, it only does 5 hit damage, although it takes more damage. It does about 15% damage now, and it had slightly more range to it, but for the most part it's the same jutsu. It just looks slightly different, which is a shame. There's a missed opportunity again on CyberConnect's part, in my opinion, to just bring something new to Shikamaru when he's in his awakening state, other than making his jutsu go just a little bit further and do a little bit more damage. He does have the cool animation underneath him, which the shadows is just oozing out of the floor. That was a good opportunity to just make his jutsus get a lot more range on them, because Shikamaru's jutsus actually have a decent amount of range to them. I don't feel like this game did the range on his particular jutsu much justice. He does have access to 2 more jutsus, which is the exploding parachutes, which is pretty cool. You actually see him do that a couple times in anime. They don't do much damage. As you can see, it only does about 2% damage on its initial hit, but it does set them ablaze and does an extra 5% damage for a total of about 7% damage in total. It's not the most powerful move, but again, Shikamaru's a strategist, and that plays very well into strategy with Shikamaru, as the parachutes follow the opponent no matter where they're running. Unfortunately, they don't have the longest range. As you can see, they're basically mid-range and they blow up relatively quickly. But it does allow Shikamaru to kind of pace the battle the way he needs to pace the battle. If you're going to be playing Shikamaru, I recommend you be a very strategic player, because that's what you're going to need to be when you're playing Shikamaru. Shikamaru does not have a lot of moves. Most of his moves are close to mid-range. He himself is not a close-range fighter, unfortunately. But if you play him right, and if you're really smart about it, you can utilize him very well. So, again, he does hit fairly hard, harder than I was expecting. The parachutes cannot be performed in the air, unfortunately. I would have liked for it to be able to be done in the air, nor does he have any air jutsus either. But again, if you're going to play Shikamaru, you got to play him very strategic. You got to be able to throw those out to kind of distract the opponent, while you either close the gap following right behind the parachute. You can close up the gap behind the opponent while stopping them in their tracks. And just, you got to be extremely strategic when playing with Shikamaru. He is a fairly difficult character to play with, but if you do learn how to play with him, it's extremely satisfying. As you can see, your opponents sweat to try to figure out how to either get to you or defeat you. So that's pretty much it for this Shikamaru breakdown. Hope you guys liked this. If you did, please like, share, subscribe, and remember, your life is a fantasy.